Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ante Room, brought to you by Heart in Hand, the Modern Oddfellows Guide, at oddfellowsguide.com. If you want to learn more about the Independent Order of Oddfellows, please check out ioof.org.
Welcome to part 2 of this 2-part video series on the symbolism of the initiatory and the first degree of the Independent Order of Oddfellows. If you enjoyed watching the first part, we thank you for tuning in for the second part. And if you missed the first part, there is a link below in the description. Make sure you check that out. And while you're down there, make sure you hit like and subscribe. Thank you.
So let's talk about degrees, and as I said, this means you'll be talking as well. So, what are some of your experiences and memories from the initiation ceremony? The mic means it's open to anybody.
Yeah, I remember who I was initiated with. I remember most of those guys that I went through with.
Right. What about some of the
sure.
aspects or symbols that you recall from the cert degree?
I remember initiation, of course, has the hoodwinks and the rattling chains.
Mm-hmm.
The chain that is on the shoulder to shoulder of all the initiates.
Right.
The notion of mortality is driven home pretty clearly, and as Neil points out, the shackles of an earthly life.
Right. Cool. So there's the light and the dark, right? That aspect to it of the hoodwinks that Neil's talking about. There's old George in the box. The chains, obligations, the charges, the obligations from the Vice Grand and the charge from the Noble Grand. But there's actually 4 symbols that are tied to the initiation degree. And those symbols are the 3 links, the skull and the crossbones, the all-seeing eye, and the scythe. And I think I pronounced it right, scythe. So I'm going to go into each one of these. But there also are the grips and the passwords that we'll talk about as well. So let's go through these one at a time. So the 3 links. So according to Ford in the Symbolism of Oddfellowship, there is somewhat speculative how the 3 links came to Oddfellows. It is certainly the only order with 3 links, but there was a symbol of the Ancient Order of Bucks from the 1700s that looks a lot like this modern version of it here, where the antlers are linked. There's also the Catholic Church has the triquetra of the Trinity, the Christian Trinity. And then this isn't clear, but this was a photo or a snippet from Ford where he shows a gimmel ring, and a gimmel ring is typically like a double ring wedding band, but this one actually was 3, and so when the rings come together, they join just like the wedding band version of it, with the hands the 2 hands coming together. I think that would be really cool if somebody was in the jewelry business could knock some of those out as an Oddfellow type ring. But the meaning of the 3 links, of course, is friendship, love, and truth. It is the symbol of Oddfellowship and the order. It is actually a copyrighted symbol, but it's in the form of FLT and with the 3 rings. So does anybody have other ideas about what the links could mean as a symbol?
Could be the fact that we're all joined together.
Right.
I don't know. It kind of the three links when they're put together like they are in the 103. It kind of resembles more the infinity symbol.
Mm-hmm.
To me, like the forever bond, the forever trust, the forever love.
Right.
I think anytime you see three together, three of something together, it tends to invoke the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. So there could be a tie to Christianity.
Right. Right. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the labels and the links are perpetually F, L, and T, and I think there's a parallel between the links in the chain and the friendship, love, and truth are the links between members within the order.
Right. Excellent. Thanks.
Has it always meant friendship, love, and truth? Like from the very beginning?
Question.
Yes. So let's take a moment, and I'm just going to do a bit of a tangent here before we go on to the other ones, and talk a little bit about the blindfolds and the chains themselves. So I think it was Mike was talking a bit about this, and or bringing this up, that the chains are significant in the ceremony because they represent a bondage. But maybe it's a bondage from what? What were your thoughts when you were kind of processing it, or now that we talk about chains as having a meaning?
Well, I certainly thought of it as the suffering of an earthly life. That in Christianity, of course, the idea would be that you're freed of that bondage when you ascend to heaven.
Okay, right.
I would actually kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
Or even ascending beyond, what Oddfellowship means to me. I mean, I'm in a whole different place than what I used to be, and I felt like I probably was literally chained down before.
Wow.
Through the volunteering and the love, I've actually been released somewhat of maybe some burdens that I used to carry.
Wow, it's fantastic. Wow, thanks, Shad. So we have this idea of bondage from the chains on us, and then the dropping of them during the ceremony. But what do you think about having like these two separate meanings about the chains? Like we have the chains of love and friendship, and then we also have chains about bondage. How do we have both? Has anybody kind of got a feel for that one?
I think Shad kind of put his finger on it there, that the friendship, love, and truth of Oddfellowship turns the earthly bondage of toil and work into duty and fulfillment.
Wow.
Into the commitment of others.
Bonding between brothers.
Yeah, and Nicola was bringing up commitment to each other. That's pretty good too. I like that. So one of the things Fords brings up is that the chains are, they represent our feelings, our moods, our situations. So it's the use of the chain that's symbolic. So we can have feelings of being held down and enslavement type with a chain. And we also have chains that can mean, love. We're all chained together, we're linked together, and so forth. So that was an interesting.
One of the things I was thinking about. Oh, sorry. One of the things I thought about when I actually have done this ritual, and maybe even when I first had it, Dickens uses the chains on Marley as all the things that he's done in his life that are tying his spirit to earth because of his miserliness and stuff like that. Now I don't know whether any of that occurred because Dickens was contemporaneous in the 18th, whatever, and I don't know whether that was just a common sort of symbolism of like being tied or chained down by your avarice and attachment to worldly greatness. But the phrases worldly greatness and that sort of stuff occur in the initiation as well as things that pass away.
Right.
Whether I was just putting those two together in my mind when I went through that, or whether there was something that was culturally about that occurred to Oddfellows and to Dickens.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Stephen. I'm going to kind of connect that with the blindfolds a bit too, because there's a touch on that. The blindfolds, or the hoodwinks, as Neil refers to them as, they provide the darkness that represents the lack of knowledge, right? And so we have the drop of the blinds, and we have the sorry, I'm gonna have to just pause somebody there. We have the imparting of the knowledge of Oddfellowship. And one of the things in the books, which I wanted to capture here, I'm going to kind of steer us back on course here a bit, but the person in the dark can be easily led down devious paths, or they can act paralyzed from not knowing which way to go. And so in the initiation, the message that the symbols have, and the message of the charges and of the, I guess in a way, a lecture that you hear from the actors, is that the knowledge imparted is meant to enlighten you, and so you know what's really important, and what knowledge allows you to follow a well-lit path. Well, all of these are parts of the explanation in Ford's book on symbolism. So I'm going to jump to the next one and kind of keep us going here. There'll be plenty of time. We can ask questions and stuff at the end. And before we go on to first degree, I'll pause again. So our next symbol is the all-seeing eye. It is obviously an ancient symbol. It's not confined to Oddfellowship. It's used in Masonic symbolism, Christian symbolism. It's on the U.S. dollar for those who've held the back of a dollar. And their meaning is pretty simple. It's the meaning of the all-seeing eye of the Supreme Being. The idea is that if you are being watched, then you will be, or might be, acting as a better person. The rays of light, they're meant to imply knowledge and enlightenment. I won't go into the detail of it, but in Ford's book, it's very specific about each of the colors used in the painting of the eye. That the eye has to be blue for a certain reason. The brow must be brown for a certain reason as well. But I'll open it up the floor and ask if anybody else has ideas on what it means to them.
It's kind of been laid out. I mean, the all-seeing eye. I mean, it speaks for itself. It's like, it doesn't matter what you do, where you do it, and who you do it with. You're not the only one that notices things.
Right.
I don't know.
That's interesting. Yeah.
People always see when they're not watching.
Right.
Saying this relates to people, but I mean, on a religious aspect, the greater power sees everything. Like people think that they're being secretive or they're being sneaky or whatever, but what they don't think is that there is a greater force on this earth that could be watching, seeing every little thing, for the good and the bad.
Right.
And maybe it's not an all, like a being that sees it like this, all known being. It's just anyone. Like, I don't like following rules, but I do it because I don't want to be judged. So.
I think that's the point, is that the all-seeing eye, which I think represents a supreme being. I think that's what it's intended to represent, is a supreme being that will bring that up when you're at the pearly gates and you are to be judged. You'll be judged for what you've done in life. And the symbol is there to remind you that that day is coming and you should behave yourself so that when you face St. Peter, you're going to make it through the pearly gates.
Right.
Or if you aren't going to behave yourself, at least do some good.
Balance it out a bit.
So that kind of leads to this question for you: is why are the chairs on the outer edge of the lodge room?
trying to get out of the sight of the eye. I don't know.
Well,
You talking about the gallery, Bill?
Because she's Italian, but I'd like to see what's coming.
Yeah. Sorry, what was that, Nicola?
Are you talking about the gallery, or are you talking about the officer stations?
Nope, I'm talking about all the members sit around the outer edge of the room. No one's lined up like church pews in the middle, correct?
Okay, I just wanted clarification.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I learned, it was from a member after my initiation, said, we're meant to keep a watchful eye on each other in case of danger and difficulties. And so you could look around the room and see if somebody was having trouble. They were emotionally having trouble or health troubles. And that the group creates a vigilance amongst themselves by being able to look each other in the eye. Also, as a truth to each other kind of membership, we don't speak behind each other's backs. And so seated in church pew ways, you have that temptation maybe to be like you're sitting in the back of the classroom and so forth. You're all being watched, not just from the all-seeing eye of the Supreme Being, but from each other. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead. So the skull and the crossbones is next. We are not pirates, even though it does look like a pirate's flag. And the way Michael pointed out, it's one of the symbols of mortality, and it represents the seriousness of life, that we should always be aware of our mortality, even when we're happy in our best days, present days. This symbol is obviously the same meaning all over the world and has been throughout time. One of the snippets I took straight from Grosh I think is really important, and it's this emblem is designed to not only teach us that we are of the earth and unto dust we must return, but we are obligated to commit the mortal remains of our departed brothers or sisters carefully to the tomb, and that we are bound to cherish their lively recollection of their virtues, and to bury their imperfections with their body beneath the clods of the valley. So if you've been to a funeral, likely the eulogy the eulogist will point out the best features and virtues of the dearly departed, and they may make jokes about some of their shortcomings or their less virtuous imperfections. But this is what we do as a society, and it's just kind of that's the symbol to remind us that we should always be thinking of our brothers and our sisters that have departed, and also that our time may come. Anybody have other ones for the skull and the crossbone? That's okay.
I was hoping that you were going to say we're somehow related to pirates.
I was going to say pirates too.
All right, I'm going to move on. You guys are happy. Okay, so the next one is the scythe. And this one is, again, ancient. There's hieroglyphs with people, the farmers using a scythe to cut wheat. But it is the Grim Reaper, or the Death's walking companion as well. And this is straight from Ford, and I love this one. That Death, the Reaper, swings his scythe, and in the swath he cuts are found the flowers and the grass, the weed and the useful herb. The best and the worst, the learned and the ignorant, the rich man and the pauper must all fall before the relentless stroke of the Reaper. So this is it. You'll find this one's probably the hardest one to find in the hall if you've ever looked. It's over the chaplain's station. I didn't mention where all these are, but most of them I think you can find. This one was the hardest to find in the room. And I want to take a bit of a tangent about this whole topic in a couple ways. So the first way is bringing up this: the learned and the ignorant, the rich and the pauper must all fall. There's another book I didn't bring up at the beginning, and it is called The Oddfellows Amulet, and it is written by this other reverend in 1848, and he describes the lodge room, which I thought was a really interesting connection to the scythe, in that all distinctions are dissolved, and that we meet as equals. We enjoy equal interest, equal respect, and no matter how humble the circumstances of the member may be or how few advantages he has enjoyed, he is regarded as a member and a brother. And I think this is that you check your ego at the door. We all put our pants on the same way every morning. Whatever, funny little terminology there is about it, people are people, and there's an equality about walking into the hall. And that's one of the lessons of the symbols of the scythe, is that we will all fall before the reaper at some point. And we have to realize that, especially in COVID times, it's really interesting doing this during a pandemic and we're locked down. But it doesn't matter who you are. You will be found for that. The last thing I want to talk about this side point is what is so important about death to the Oddfellows. And I think this article I found, I posted it in the Victoria site on the Facebook page, is about this study at the University of Arizona. And I can't see if any of you are nodding or anything right now, but this is an interesting study in that they took a group and they set these people up as a study to, I assume they were relatively good at basketball, and they had two teams. And the way the story is structured is that one team is in black and the other team is in a gray or a white color, and they play the first half of a game, and they do this number of games to do the study, and the team that is in black is watched by a group, and a team that's in gray or white, is the lighter color, is watched. And at halftime, they each go into separate locker rooms, and the team in black is given a pep talk, just a classic basketball pep talk about how they're playing and skill and so forth. Before they leave the locker room at the end of the half, they're asked to change their jerseys. So they change their jerseys into a new black jersey and they go out onto the court. But meanwhile, the lighter jersey team is getting a pep talk that is all about legacy, mortality, and it wasn't about basketball. It was about leaving a mark, doing their best. It was just a different pep talk completely. And they didn't change their jerseys. They went out onto the court. And when they were on the court, they saw that the other team, new jerseys, were black jerseys with the skull and crossbones on them. And the study showed that the players who had given the pep talk and were staring at the skull and the crossbones performed better than the control groups. That's kind of it for the symbols on the initiatory degree. So I'll take this moment if there's anybody has any questions or any other comments about the symbols, those four, then maybe I'll take a moment now.
I heard, actually, I read somewhere, I can't remember where now, actually, that that was a fairly common throughout history lesson in all sorts of groups, that the you are mortal, as a sort of introduction to a group, you are mortal, you will die, we're all in this together, and just that, I don't remember what they call it, but it's certainly very popular in the 18s. But just as a sort of a basic lesson for young men, particularly, I think.
Right.
And I think, and life expectancy was much shorter back then. So once you were an adult, your clock was ticking.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to move on a little bit more about initiation, and we're going to go to the secret passwords and the grips, because they're an important part, even though they're not symbols. So in the 1800s, there was a different grip for every degree, but it was important that those who said they were members were really members and not imposters trying to steal the benefits of membership. So an Oddfellow traveling to another city with his membership card, maybe it was his, maybe he'd found it, could be introduced to a lodge, but with the proper grip and the proper password, that would confirm them as an Oddfellow. And the big difference that we see today compared to back then is that benefit of membership. And there was always the lessons of life and how to be charitable and so forth. But as an Oddfellow in good standing, you would receive financial benefits in times of distress, like unemployment or family illness. So unlike a government that steps up like we are right now, you would have joined a fraternity like the Oddfellows specifically for the benefits. The oldest dues or bylaws that I was able to find for Columbia is from 1893. And in 1893, a member who was on sick leave, so to speak, wasn't able to work, would receive $10 a week. And you multiply that by 27 to get that into current dollars. So a member would receive roughly $270 in today's buying power a week for up to 6 months. But they would also get a weekly visit from a paid doctor. So the doctor was there for, making sure you were doing well, but also from the lodge's perspective to ensure that you were healthy enough to return to work and when you were healthy enough. The last thing about Oddfellowship is, what about that goat? So goats are used in symbols for Oddfellows. I'm going to throw everybody out on mute here. So it was a legend, and then it became reality. And so it was rumored that at Masonic and Oddfellows initiations that included the hazing behavior of riding animals. And so novelty companies began to cater to this by designing and selling replica goats that were not part of the official ritual, but became part of the fun of an initiation ceremony. And so here's some examples of what a goat would look like in the 1800s. So the royal bumper, the candidate like this one would have sat on it blindfolded in their hoodwink, and they would have been carted around the room with it falling, wobbling around, and they'd be tasked with staying on it. The more dangerous one seems to be from the Dumoulin brothers with the Ferris wheel coaster goat, which would actually flip over, had wheels and would screech and moan and groan. This candidate was probably applied many glasses of ale or lager before going through this this initiation or this hazing.
Is there a prisoner pushing him?
Well, he's dressed up like it. I don't know why. But it wasn't secret. So these are two clippings from the British Daily Columnist. The one article just says "riding the goat," and it's the announcement of the initiation in the newspaper. And riding the goat is a common term for being initiated into some fraternity or some group. And here it is written in the paper that it was a very successful initiation. The team is getting quite proficient at the new work, that they they will be doing initiation again at the next meeting with 2 more candidates. And the members of this lodge claim that their new goat is a high kicker and no mistake. I don't know where they stored it in the old building, but there would have been something that looked like one of these in the hall.
Could we get those to Russ and get him working on that?
Probably. We could probably get one. If you just, I found a really great picture of somebody on this for real, blindfolded and so forth. And then there's a YouTube video of somebody being pushed around on one as well. That's an old one from the 20s or 30s.
Now, Billy, may
Yes.
you notice on that second one, the wheel roller coaster goat?
Yeah.
There's all noises coming from the bottom. Is that supposed to be your fear escaping your body?
I don't know. So this could be a bang. It might be a blank gun shell or something like that would go off.
No, I'm talking to the one with the prisoner.
Yes.
Yeah, all those.
All those, it says, I don't know, it says brrr.
Do you know what year these articles are from?
This over here?
Yeah.
So these are from 1892, the newspaper.
So did the Oddfellows used to be like quite well known around town, I would think.
Yeah. Yeah. It was in the 1890s. There were how many lodges were there? 4, 5 by then. So there was Victoria 1, Columbia 2, Dominion 4, Acme 14, and Peerless 33. We're all in the hall. We're all in Victoria.
Those are all Oddfellows groups.
Those are all Oddfellows plus a number of Rebecca lodges as well.
That's quite a lot just for what would have been quite a small city back then, I would think.
That's true. In 1893, there was 180 members of Columbia 2, and there probably was the same for Columbia, for Victoria. And when Peerless was established, a month later, they had 100 members.
Wow, so that must have been a big part of the community because there's so many people involved.
Yeah, and they were after the unemployment insurance.
If you enjoyed what you're watching so far, make sure to click like and subscribe and to hit the link in the description to watch part 2 of this video.